Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Sober Survival Guide: How to Free Yourself from Alcohol Forever by Simon Chapple. Foreword by Annie Grace. Narrated by Liam Gerrard. Foreword by Annie Grace. I met Simon Chapple in a video chat room when he joined This Naked Mind podcast to tell his story. I was immediately struck by Simon's passion for the sober life. Not only had he overcome any desire to drink, he was thriving. He was proud. He was excited. And he was passionate. And he was paying it forward. Simon had already started an incredible online group, Be Sober, and members were flocking to his joyful and encouraging approach. It was not long after that amazing meeting that I asked Simon to come to the United States and be trained to be the first This Naked Mind certified coach in the UK. Meeting Simon, IRL, in real life, surpassed all my expectations. He was the same kind, genuine and outrageously passionate person. It was a joy to spend the week together, train him to be a coach, and watch, as he has now coached thousands of people along the journey to what he has termed alcohol freedom. Hearing that Simon had written a book was no surprise. When I read it, I was awed by the combination of raw, honest storytelling with practical, tangible tips for finding true joy and freedom without alcohol. You have in your hands the guide to letting go of alcohol, and maybe, even more importantly, to life after putting down the bottle. The map to exuberance, self-care and true freedom in an alcohol-free lifestyle. I hope you enjoy this book as much as I did. Love, Annie Grace. This Naked Mind: Control Alcohol, Find Freedom, Discover Happiness, and Change Your Life. Introduction. Hands up if you believe any of the following about drinking alcohol to be true. I can't have fun without it. Imagine going to a party without drinking. It makes me feel less anxious or depressed. It helps me sleep. I can't relax without it. It makes me entertaining to be around. It fits the lifestyle of my boozy friends. I like the taste. It's cool and sophisticated. I'm not confident enough to talk to new people without it. It helps me deal with all the problems that life throws my way. It stops me from worrying, especially about how much I'm drinking. Ironic, I know. If you find yourself nodding at even one of these statements, then I know how you feel. I too used to believe that I couldn't live without alcohol, and that once I'd had a few drinks, I was funny to be around, hilarious in fact. Being honest, I was a heavy daily drinker for well over 20 years. Slowly, I reached the point at which I felt sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. I became fed up with the hangovers, the regretful behaviour. There was enough of that to write another book about. And the damage alcohol was causing my relationships, my career, my body, and my mind, to say nothing of my soul. I started to see that the beliefs I listed were wrong. Alcohol was no longer serving me or adding anything positive to my life. In fact, it had been stealing my happiness and well-being for years, and I decided I wanted what it had stolen back. From this point on, it took me a full 5 years to face up to my problem and find the key to transforming my life. Because alcohol is so addictive, it was doing exactly what it was designed to do, get me hooked on it, so I felt I couldn't give up. How on earth was I going to haul myself out of the hole I'd dug for myself, and which I'd been stuck in for so long? It was obvious I was a problem drinker. But what should I do now? This uncertainty led me to dig myself even further into the ground by drinking more, so that I would stop thinking about it. I just wanted the painful thoughts to leave my head, and wine seemed the perfect solution. However, I did eventually remove the grip that alcohol had on me, and have gone on to live a life of complete happiness ever since. I learned that what I'd believed about alcohol was completely wrong. Of course, I didn't understand this at the beginning, but as I steadily moved down the path to alcohol freedom, everything became so very clear. You may be listening to this book because you too are tired and fed up with the routine of drinking, and you want to make a change and improve your life. Or you may simply be curious about how a life without alcohol might look for you. Could it be better, happier, calmer, more peaceful? Perhaps you're already on the path to changing your relationship with booze and might have read other sober books or taken part in programs to help you quit. I want you to know that you too can do the same as me, and you don't have to wait for years like I did. Also, I want to reassure you that addiction is never a person's fault, and that there's no need to blame yourself for finding it hard to give up. It honestly isn't as hard as you might think, and this book will provide the support and advice you need as you progress on your sober journey. You may have heard of the word sober and assume it simply describes someone who doesn't drink, but sobriety is so much more than that. For me, it's a lifestyle, a way of living due to a choice I made that led me on a wonderful journey of self-improvement, awareness, and well-being. So when you hear my thoughts on sobriety in this book, I'm not just talking about it as simply quitting drinking. On the contrary, to go sober is to embark on an amazing adventure during which you'll discover a whole new version of yourself. For me, that's included launching one of the world's fastest-growing online sober communities. I also work as a coach, helping people who want to change their relationship with alcohol, and have spoken at live events and become an enthusiastic advocate of the sober movement. We're not alone. This means that I've helped thousands of people to explore how alcohol fits into their life, and many of them have chosen to quit drinking altogether. Now, through this book, my hope is that I can do the same for you. By the end of it, you should see how you can be free to make your own choices about how you drink, and you will feel equipped to decide whether you want to do it any longer. It's up to you. Don't waste time like I did. Take action now. How to use this book. This book is split into 2 parts. The first is designed to set you up for success and put you in a place where you can find freedom from alcohol, if that's what you want. It's important that you listen to this all the way through, as it contains essential information for when you're in the early stages of controlling your drinking. The second part serves as a handbook as you move forward into an alcohol-free life, and this is, if I'm honest, where this book comes into its own. As you continue it, you'll notice that I've used my own experiences and those of the people I've worked with to help ensure you're ready for the challenges, fears, and questions that will come up in the years after you've quit drinking. You'll learn how to handle the work Christmas party without a glass of bubbly in hand, the joys of sober holidays, what to do when you stop drinking but your partner won't, and a whole lot more. With this part, you can dip in and out, picking the chapters that address the problems you're facing that particular day or week. At this point, it's important to be clear that this book isn't a replacement for professional medical advice. If you're physically addicted to alcohol, or experiencing severe withdrawal symptoms such as shaking, tremors, hallucinations, or any other side effects that cause you concern, please visit your doctor and get medical advice. However, if you're either ready to start thinking about what a life without alcohol might look like, or have already given up and are looking for further support and tactics as you move forward on your alcohol-free journey, this book is for you. Either way, you have found the perfect companion to help you on the path to complete freedom. Let's take some positive action. Continue on and start learning how to change your life in the most incredible and positive ways. I am Simon Chapple, and I am an alcoholic. Strike that. Actually, no. I am Simon Chapple, and I don't drink alcohol. Why do I describe myself like this? Because I don't feel I should carry a label for the rest of my life. I'm now free from the grip of alcohol, and I don't drink. It's that simple. You don't need to carry a label either. You can choose whatever works for you. Some people like to use the term alcoholic to help keep them focused, but for me, it doesn't fit and is not one I care to use. I am also not in recovery, which sounds like I have an injury or I'm suffering from an illness. This word suggests I'm not 100% fit and healthy, which is wrong. Since I cut alcohol out of my life, I've become the best version of myself I've ever been, along with finding true happiness, peace, and new levels of calm. I'm not in recovery, I'm free. Alcohol is the only drug in the world that we seem to have to justify not taking. When someone quits smoking, they're congratulated on the achievement, not referred to as a cigarette-aholic who is in recovery from tobacco. But when we stop drinking, we're often met with some strange reactions from people, and on top of this, we're assigned the labels I've mentioned. Alcoholism still carries a huge stigma. However, I've been working hard to change social attitudes and preconceptions, and as the sober revolution gathers force, and more people realize that a life without alcohol is the best choice, the tide is starting to turn. Remember that you hold the power to be who you want to be, and you can choose what labels you use for yourself. Alcohol does not have to define you as a person. Alcohol and me. I drank alcohol every day for as long as I can remember. It was a love affair that lasted the best part of 30 years. My habit started when I was around 14 years old, and started to notice how my dad would drink red wine at home. I'd look up to him with admiration, thinking how cool, mature and sophisticated it seemed. I remember he drank a posh French red wine called Beaujolais Nouveau. Like most teenagers, I thought the world of my dad and wanted to emulate him. To me, that meant drinking grown-up wine, just like he did. I was only a child, and we lived in a small semi-detached house in a military town called Aldershot, around 20 miles south of London, England. My dad used to run his own courier business, but he never really made it big, and always seemed to fall short of achieving his dreams. He had an amazing ability when it came to attracting bad luck, and we never had much money, although now I'm older and wiser, I realise he actually brought a lot of that misfortune on himself through the impulsive decisions he made. But it didn't make me love him any less. In fact, I admired the way he never gave up. I thought it was amazing that he had his own business, no matter how up and down it was. He was a solid rock for me, especially during my turbulent teenage years, which were one swirling mass, or should I say mess, of hormones, girls, school, and worries about what people thought of me. My mum was, and still is, wonderful and supportive of everything I do, but she's always been a natural-born worrier, and from an early age I can remember her convincing me that danger and death awaited this little boy around every corner. I firmly believe that the worry elements of the anxiety that would go on to affect me were a direct result of her overprotective nature. However, she was only looking out for me, and I haven't run into any danger or death yet, so thanks, Mum. You did a good job. As an only child, Mum and Dad were huge influences on my life. We had family meals almost every day, and when I was around 14, after badgering my dad for weeks and weeks, he started to let me have a glass of red wine with my dinner. At first, I thought it tasted awful. Of course it did. It was poison, and my body was sending me a message not to put it inside myself, just as if I'd eaten food that had gone off. But I ignored the warnings and soon developed a taste for the wine. This evolved into me being allowed to take the remains of the bottle up to my bedroom. Before long, I was getting my hands on my own alcohol and starting to rely on it to numb feelings of sadness, loneliness, and, of course, the dreaded dark clouds of anxiety that was starting to take over my life. Around the same time, my small group of friends and I decided to see if we could get served in the local pub, called the Beehive. With Aldershot being an army town, they were used to fresh-faced boys coming in, so we used the cover story of being new army recruits. I remember how nervous I was as we approached the door, as well as the smell of stale beer and smoke hanging in the air outside. I had visions of us being turned away and laughed out of the bar, but we walked in and tried to look like confident lads who were simply out for a few beers. To my amazement, we were served without any question. I'd never had a proper pint before, and was surprised at how big it was in my hand. But I gulped it down like it was water, and was soon back at the bar ordering my next. We ended up visiting the Beehive a few nights a week for years, and it became our drinking haunt. I wonder if the landlord ever wondered why we didn't get posted away with our military unit. At every pub visit, 1 pint always quickly became more, and I would feel myself relaxing as the alcohol took effect. It was almost a euphoric experience, and my anxiety and worries faded into the background. I was laughing and having so much fun with my friends. Clearly this was what being grown up was all about. Maybe I'd found the answer to my problems after all. I only ever drank beer in pubs, probably because I thought it was macho. I would usually work my way through 4 to 6 pints in an evening, often with some shots of straight whiskey or vodka to wash it down, and then stagger my way home and start on the wine. I always had to have the wine, no matter what. Looking back, I was on a slippery slope, even in my mid to late teens. When I reached 17, I left school and landed a job as an office junior in town. I couldn't wait to move into the big, wide world, and I loved putting on my business suit and feeling like I was on the path to making it big. My mum and I worked for different businesses that were close to each other, and we would walk to our respective offices together each morning. Our strolls were a lovely opportunity to talk one-on-one and enjoy each other's company. One day, however, Mum received terrible news out of the blue. The insurance company where she'd worked as a typist for years was closing, and she would be made redundant. This hit her hard, and, knowing how much she habitually worried about things, I can only imagine the turmoil it caused her. She ended up sinking into depression and suffering a nervous breakdown, which put a huge strain on our family. Fast forward to the age of 25. I had 2 failed relationships behind me and was still working in the same insurance job that I'd been in since I left school, which had long since lost its shine. I'd met the girl of my dreams, Michelle, who I'm proud to say is now my wife, and we decided to move into our first home together. When I announced this to my parents, they told me the very next day they were getting divorced, and they'd been living separate lives for years, but hadn't wanted to break up for my sake. I often wondered why Dad slept in the spare bedroom, and now it was clear. They'd waited all this time and put on a show just for my benefit, but why hadn't they just parted company when they wanted to, and been happy instead? This was heartbreaking for me, and I spent days crying like a baby. So what did I do? I drank more to blot it out and numb the pain. This was the point at which my drinking became even heavier, and I struggled to remember a single day between then and when I was 44 years old, when I didn't have at least a bottle of red wine a night. In fact, just about the only times I can remember not drinking was when I was sick with the flu and when I was forced to spend the night in hospital after an operation. It says a lot about the level of power that alcohol had over me, that before the procedure I was more apprehensive about not having any wine than I was about going through the ordeal of surgery. Unless I was physically unable to lay my hands on my wine, I would drink. It was always there for me, like a faithful friend, never leaving my side. It was the true constant in my life, and I was now deep into an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, and totally unaware I was heading down a dark and dangerous rabbit hole. In 2004, Michelle and I had a daughter, but I was never truly happy. I loved them both, but there was a void in my life that I couldn't put my finger on or explain. I felt like I was evolving into a sad, grumpy old man, but I assumed that was just who I was. Maybe I should accept it. My anxiety also became worse. Michelle and I had started our own business, a marketing company which we still run today, and the anxiety had grown so bad that I could no longer bear to go into the office. The slightest issue with a staff member or a client making a complaint would result in me having a meltdown. I'd wind myself into a complete state with irrational worries about the slightest little thing. This led me to visit doctors, counsellors, and even a hypnotherapist. None of them helped me much, nor did they explore my drinking habits or suggest cutting alcohol out of my life. One doctor asked me how much I drank as a routine question, but of course I lied. Don't we all? I've since learned that doctors routinely double the figure they're told by their patients to gain a true picture of their drinking habits. We heavy drinkers are excellent liars. Sadly, I also fell out with my dad over a petty argument, and we haven't spoken or seen to each other for over 5 years. I often wonder what part my state of mind, due to alcohol, had to play in that. I would dearly love to heal the past and share my story with him, as I think he would be incredibly proud of what I've achieved. So if you ever read this book, Dad, take these words as the olive branch of peace. The result was that I took the decision to step away and take some much-needed time out, which I felt awful about, as we had over 20 staff and hundreds of clients who required constant managing. Michelle had to run things on her own, but she was supportive of me and knew I needed space to deal with my anxiety issues. It was during this break that I started looking more closely at my relationship with alcohol, and became curious about what my life might look like if I could ever stop drinking. Whenever I started to consider the vision of an alcohol-free life, the thought of not being able to drink, even just for one day, put a knot in my stomach. It seemed ridiculous and unachievable, but my mind kept nudging away at me and saying, something needs to change. And then, it did. The big change. During my quest to explore my drinking, I came across the book This Naked Mind by Annie Grace, which was based on a 30-day experiment that Annie had designed to help readers understand the effects of alcohol and to question their own relationships with it. What did I have to lose? I bought myself a copy, and after the first chapter was hooked. I've discovered that I have a strange habit of getting hooked on things, so now I'm mindful about what I get myself into. If you haven't read This Naked Mind, I recommend doing so. The term game changer was an understatement for me. I have so much to thank Annie for. Her work has helped to change the lives of thousands of people, including my own, and she's been at the forefront of the sober revolution with her non-judgmental and practical approach to changing the way people view alcohol. I read the book twice in a row, and then started watching videos about sobriety, joining online sober groups, and learning everything I could about living a life without alcohol. I found this new sober world fascinating and exciting. However, even though I was on the right track, success didn't come straight away, nor was I expecting it to. It took quite a bit of hard work, but I firmly believed that I would get out what I put in. It was obvious to me that I needed to keep educating myself and working on my beliefs. In fact, I approached it like I was studying for the most important exam of my life. Each day would find me making notes and voice recordings, and even starting to blog about my journey on my website. These activities helped me to express my thoughts and feelings in a structured way, and an unexpected benefit of my blog is that I can now look back on what I have learned, comparing notes with what I know now. After 2 months of daily reading, watching videos, and journaling about sobriety, I could feel a slow change starting to emerge. It was as if my mind no longer wanted me to drink as a default activity, and there was a new pathway forming. Somehow I knew there would be something incredible waiting for me at the end of it. Of course, there were odd days when I started to feel bored of reading about sobriety, but I wanted to learn about it so badly that I pushed through. Then, one day, I realized I was experiencing a mindset shift from I can't have a drink to I don't want one. This felt incredibly liberating. My beliefs about alcohol were changing. Drinking started to become unimportant, and I didn't want booze around me any longer. I found myself in a place of complete freedom and peace. Even then, the transformation wasn't without its hiccups. There were a few false starts and a couple of teary meltdowns, but I managed to put myself on the path to sobriety, which felt so exciting. The very first day I put the bottle down, I took a selfie, and after a few weeks, took another to compare them. The difference in my face, skin, and eyes was incredible. The dark shadows had disappeared, I was no longer bloated, and my skin was positively glowing. This spurred me on, because I figured if this much had changed on the outside in such a short space of time, imagine what was going on inside. As time went by, the dark clouds of anxiety that had hung over me for years started to fade, and I could see the sun starting to shine through. I even questioned what was going on, as I hadn't felt this good in years. After all, I'd only quit drinking because I didn't want to die before the age of 50. I'd never expected to experience a whole new lease of life on top. And guess what? The anxiety has never returned. It felt like a toxic relationship had come to an end, one that should have finished years ago. Now I could see how much better my life was without the constant cycle of drinking and its associated behaviours and side effects. There was no way I was going to return to my old ways. It was over. At the same time as starting the Be Sober blog, I decided to launch a Facebook group for other people who wanted to explore their relationship with alcohol. I'd already participated in several of these, but I specifically wanted to create something with a friendly and personal feel, where members could reach out for support and know that they had a trusting and caring community around them. I also felt quite lonely on my journey, So when people started asking to join the group, it showed me there were thousands of others in the same boat. My Facebook group is now one of the largest online sober communities in the world, with thousands of members supporting each other while working to change their relationship with alcohol. If you'd like to join the group, you'd be welcomed with open arms. Just visit besober.co.uk for the link, or search Be Sober on Facebook. I love reading the posts and comments from the group members because they're so inspirational and heartwarming. Later in the book, I'll share some of my favourites to add a real-world perspective to the challenges that arise in sobriety. As my blog started to grow, I thought it would be great to ask Annie Grace for an interview. After all, it was her book that had changed my life. To my amazement, she agreed, and the conversation was great fun, even if I was a little starstruck. You can watch it on the Be Sober website. After the interview, Annie asked me if I'd thought about becoming an alcohol coach, and would I be interested in joining her team at This Naked Mind, her sober coaching business. I'd made one change in my life by cutting out alcohol, and now more doors were opening for me on the back of it. After I'd pinched myself to check it wasn't a dream, I agreed, and before long I was on a plane to America to start training as a coach with Annie and her team. I've now become a senior coach at This Naked Mind. I've talked at the This Naked Mind live event in Denver, Colorado, and I even helped train new coaches. Through this, I've helped thousands of people to change the way they think about drinking and to quit for good, enabling them to become truly free from the grip of alcohol. The journey to sobriety can seem scary and confusing, and you might be worried about which direction to take and what strategies to use. I wrote this book by drawing on my own experiences to help you as you go forward. It's like a map and compass to ensure you find your way to alcohol freedom without getting lost or ending back at the start. In fact, one of the resources I wish I'd had back then was a book that advised me on the specific problems and challenges I faced after I made the decision to give up the drink. Those meltdowns would have been a lot easier to deal with if I'd known what they were caused by and what to do about them. There are plenty of books that help you get off the booze as a first step, but I couldn't find any that would set me up and hold my hand for the challenges I faced in the months, years, and lifetime ahead. But enough about me. Let's get started. Part 1. The first part of this book sets the scene for you to explore what an alcohol-free life might look like for you. It will also help you to look closely at your relationship with drinking and your beliefs about how it serves your life. Please listen to all the chapters here. You can dip in and out of the ones in Part 2 if you like, but in this section, you'll need it all. Trust me. Chapter 1. What you need to know about alcohol. Over 90% of people in the Western world drink alcohol, and sadly over 2 million of them a year die as a direct result. Just pause and think about that number. Over the course of a decade, 20 million people end up dead because of drinking. If alcohol had never existed, and someone invented it today, I'm pretty sure it would never reach the shops. Picture the scene. The inventor of this incredible new drink called alcohol is sat in a dark, smoky bar, pitching his new invention to unsuspecting customers. "I've come up with this amazing new drink. Go on, have a glass. It makes you lose your inhibitions, do dangerous and regrettable things, and forget you did them afterwards. You'll also become emotional, argumentative, and violent. The next day you'll almost certainly feel sick and ill, but you'll still crave more of it because it's incredibly addictive. If you drink it consistently over time, there's a good chance you'll damage your physical and mental health, and maybe even lose your job, home, and family. It might even kill you in the end." Would you take a sip? I don't think so. And yet this stuff is available to buy right now. I like to call it cleverly packaged poison. Of the small amount of people who don't drink, only a small percentage are sober because of making a conscious choice that alcohol isn't for them. This is how deeply ingrained drinking is in our culture, to the point where many people think you're slightly odd if you don't drink. Very few consider alcohol to be a drug, even though it's among the most harmful and addictive substances in the world. It's considered socially acceptable and the done thing in most countries. In fact, where I live in the UK, you generally have to give some kind of justification not to drink. Imagine having to do that with heroin or cocaine. On top of this, we live in a...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?